Yes, Mr. Speaker, will the sponsor yield for some questions, please?
Will you yield, Mr. Engelbright?
I yield.
Mr. Engelbright yields.
Thank you, Mr. Engelbright. And first, I certainly just want to say I understand, knowing you as long as I have been working with you, I know your intentions behind this legislation are very commendable and a laudable goal. But there's certainly some, reading through it, some questions and concerns that I have, and I think some of my other colleagues may have. And I was wondering if we could go through it a little bit and kind of hopefully address some of these things. Currently, right now in the state, we're going through a proceeding with the state, both from the REV proceeding, the Reforming the Energy Vision proceeding, and also the Clean Energy Standard proceeding that the governor has proposed. Is that not correct?
That is my understanding, yes.
How does this proposal here that we have in front of us, how does that coincide with what they're doing? Because from my understanding, there's still some things left to be determined and analyzed. So how does this compare to what you've heard the governor talk about through comments and through these proceedings and public hearings? How does this compare with that?
Your question is a very good one, and I think it's important that it be placed into perspective here that the governor has already taken a significant leadership role in this area, both within our state and nationally, and should be commended for that. Unfortunately, governors change, executive orders can change, different agencies can evolve in different directions unless there is guidance that is statutory. And that's what this is intended to do, to take some of those same initiatives that you have referred to, which have come from the executive, and place them into statute. It adds predictability, it adds certainty, and on this issue, we need both of those.
Relative to the 50 by 30 goal, and then the issue relative to the greenhouse emissions, your bill, this bill we have before us, would ultimately have the greenhouse emissions go down to 0%, 100% for reduction by 2050, versus I think the governor's proposal is about a 40% reduction over the same time. Is that accurate from what I understand?
We're talking about man-made anthropogenic emissions, greenhouse gases that are generated through the actions of ourselves.
Sure. With the proceedings that are ongoing, I know you said where this is going to try to complement that because you could have new governors. One of the things that is being done right now, the REV proceeding and the Clean Energy Standard, they're right now trying to examine the impacts to the electrical system and the reliability system of that system right now, and that has yet to be determined. Given the complexities of the legislation we have before us and the far-reaching impacts it could have, wouldn't it be wise to get back this study, this analysis, to see how this is going to actually affect our energy reliability structure that we have in the state, the ability to deliver energy to the consumers, the businesses, the farmers, the residents of this state? Wouldn't it be wise to wait to get that analysis before we move forward with such a far-reaching piece of legislation?
It is wise to have eyes open. It is wise to have our institution in close observation with our eyes open, but it is not wise to wait.
The other part that we're also waiting to get impact back from the analysis that's going on between the REV and the Clean Energy Standard is the PSC's cost study, and those comments, those public comments have been ongoing, and they're supposed to be coming in by June 6th. Again, even kind of waiting to see what those kind of comments back, the significant impact it could have on, because what we're talking about here with this legislation is going to have far-reaching impacts. I know from your perspective to the environment, which is a positive thing from your perspective, but also you can't deny the major impact this could have on the business community, the manufacturers, the farmers, and the like. So wouldn't it be a good idea to get that information back before we start moving forward with such a comprehensive, far-reaching piece of legislation?
Well, the legislation is aspirational. There are no guarantees that if we vote yes, that we're going to see all of the things that this bill calls, that this potential law would call for, but it certainly sets an expectation and it does set goals that we know are achievable based upon experience in other jurisdictions, as well as in our own state. We have already taken some steps in the right direction. It isn't as if we start at zero to work towards zero.
It's my understanding with this bill compared to what's being discussed right now as part of the REV proceeding and what we really have under current law, both under the clean energy standard that's being reviewed and then what we have under the existing renewable portfolio standard, it's my understanding the allowed renewable energy systems under this bill are more limited than what's being that we have right now as proposed under the clean energy standard and the current existing renewable portfolio standard. In particular, I'm referring to the fuel cells.
Well, the main difference is that this does not include nuclear power by definition as renewable. And as you know, that is an important part of the calculations that really skew things if you include nuclear power.
So this bill specifically would not allow fuel cells which do not utilize a fossil.
It does allow fuel cells.
It does. Okay, that's
Yes.
It's contradictory to what I
Hydrogen.
have. I'll take your word for it. It's kind of contradictory to what I have here, but that's okay. I'll move on. Relative to
Notwithstanding the Hindenburg disaster, hydrogen offers great promise.
relative to CO2 emissions, if New York were to eliminate all its CO2 emissions, do you know how much that would relate to the total U.S. Carbon emissions in the country would be? How much, if we just eliminated all the carbon emissions, and we're not talking, but if we reduce all in New York, what kind of impact that would have?
I've seen various calculations. One calculation I've seen is 3.8%.
Yep, that's very, very similar to what I have, 3.3, so I'll take your word for it. Now, if we take that same analysis and say, eliminate all New York emissions, CO2 emissions, what kind of impact would that have as a percentage of world emissions? Because we're in a global economy, we're in a global environment. What percentage would that have related to our world economy, our world emissions? If we eliminate just all of New York's, which you're
Again,
trying to do.
using the same calculations, I believe that the figure is 0.5%.
Very good. That's the same number I have, too. The question I want to ask, and I know you know the answer to, but just to get on the record. So this bill only impacts New York State. It doesn't impact any other states, correct?
Not necessarily. It doesn't have impact by jurisdiction, but it does, and this is important, and I alluded to this in my opening comments, it does have an impact on our neighboring states and all of our sister states across the nation, because as goes New York, so goes the nation. It used to be as goes General Motors, so goes the nation. But in fact, on the environment, many of the major environmental initiatives of the last half a century have come from New York. We are a national leader, and we are emulated and respected. If we take a stand, it will not only benefit our citizens, as you rightly suggest the possibility of, but also it will impact, not statutorily, but by example, our sister states.
So I understand what you're saying, that this will have an impact on other states because your belief is, and the belief of your side is that this is going to force other states or encourage other states to go along, but it doesn't, through the statute, do anything that it's not going to compel Pennsylvania to change their laws. It's not going to compel New Jersey.
That's correct.
And it certainly doesn't compel other countries like Brazil, India, or China to change their regulations as it relates to CO2 emissions, correct?
That's correct.
So when we're talking about New York in and of itself, just from a country perspective, we're talking about 3.3 or 3.8% of the total CO2 emissions. But when we talk about world emissions, and again, we can all agree that we're in a world economy, global economy, we're only talking about 0.5% of the world CO2 emissions. That's what this bill would affect.
That is what we hope it will have as an impact of benefit within our state. And again, I believe we would be emulated and that we would be copied and that we would see a cascade effect by adding the credibility of our state, which is significant. We are a world financial leader. We are a cultural leader of the world. We have great leaders that our state has produced. Historically, we have credibility. If we take this step, it will add credibility that will in turn inspire others to follow in our lead.
Well, I certainly appreciate your optimism, and I certainly do appreciate that. But let me ask you a question. Have you heard of the terminology carbon leakage?
I have.
And what's your understanding of the word for our colleagues? And if you don't, I'll certainly read it.
Well, carbon leakage is a somewhat cynical reference that is often used to describe a situation that occurs for reasons, I'm quoting now from the Business Council's memo, to describe the situation that occurs for reasons of costs related to climate policies, businesses transferring production to other countries which have laxer constraints on greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, the premise is that this would lead to an increase in total emissions. That is an unsubstantiated premise, but it's nevertheless something that's built into the definition that I just read you from that source.
And I can understand your questioning of the source, but certainly you can agree that we've heard stories in the past of businesses leaving New York State because of the business climate, the tax climate, the regulatory climate. So certainly this type of issue would certainly fall into that category from a regulatory tax paradigm that our businesses in New York State are facing every day.
We have a very dynamic marketplace, but I should also point out there are many businesses that come into our state because we have arguably the greatest education system, particularly our higher education system, to be found anywhere in the land, anywhere in the world. We have creative, well-trained, skilled workers. People bring their businesses to New York because they can make money by making use of our natural resources, our clean environment, and the fact that we have such talented workers.
Thank you, sir. Do you know right now, with this ambitious 50 by 30 goal, how much solar, wind, and hydro we would have to put on the books to meet that goal, that threshold? Do you know how much that would require from a solar, wind?
I'm not acquainted with a calculation that has given us that number.
Well, I guess
I am the original sponsor of the Solar Choice Act, the Solar Net Metering Act, the Wind Net Metering Act. Those bills were done 20 years ago. I believe that you have seen in those 20 years a dramatic increase in the use of those technologies, and we have 34 years before we arrive at 2050. That's almost just under twice as many years as have already passed since we passed the original enabling legislation. So I'm optimistic based upon that track record.
So the reason I ask the question is because when we're at, if you read the New York Independent System Operators Report, when we're at full generating capacity and we have our peak demand, like this summer we're going to have our peak demand, based on the available resources we have for energy sources, we need about 40,000 kilowatts of energy to produce. So a big chunk of that right now is natural gas, coal, nuclear. Those are a big component of that generating capacity. Under this bill, all those would go away and we could rely solely on solar, wind, hydroelectric. And right now, do you realize how much wind we have on the books right now as a percentage of that 40,000 that we need?
I don't have that figure.
1,750 megawatts.
Okay.
Are you aware of how much we have from a solar capacity?
No, but I think you probably have a figure that you're going to tell us, so go ahead.
About 32 megawatts of utility solar scale. So according to Google, 1 megawatt of solar would take up about 2.5 acres of land. So that's quite a bit of territory.
Well, may I?
Yeah.
May I just-
But I guess what I'm trying to say, we have so much demand for energy that we have to produce That's a lot of solar, wind, and hydroelectric. That's a lot of solar panels, a lot of wind farms that have to go up to make up for natural gas, to make up for coal, to make up for nuclear, which your intention with this bill is to do that. I'm out of time, but I'll come back later.
I believe that that's what the buzzer indicates. Yes.
I would welcome
There's-
further conversation, though. Thank you.
Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield for a few questions?
I yield.
Mr. Engelbright yields.
Thanks, Steve. Again, I'm going to echo the sentiments. I know you've put a lot of hard work into this, and I applaud you for the efforts. And, you know, I too, see the benefits of this as far as moving towards more renewables and pushing it along, if we will. But like you, I am also from Suffolk County, Long Island. And Long Island may at times otherwise be known as the land of NIMBY. And so we run into quite a bit of problems when it comes to going to renewables. So let me start with just a few questions. The goals for the greenhouse gas emissions, are there penalties if those goals are not met on time?
There are no fines contemplated in this bill.
Okay.
No penalties as such.
Okay, and none for the renewable energy programs either for that timeline?
No.
Okay. And are they regional or statewide as far as the...
Statewide.
They are statewide. My concern with that is Long Island. My concern is that maybe one part of the state has the ability to go very heavily towards solar and such, and that maybe Long Island won't and won't meet those standards. And I just don't know if it's actually an attainable goal.
Well, I'm smiling because I'm a little bemused because in your district, in our township of Brookhaven, the great town of Brookhaven, is the Claire Rose facility, which is a model not only for the island but for the state, where a very successful local business has stepped up to do their part. It's a patriotic act, really, on the part of Claire Rose, and I really salute them. They built a new, as you know, you've probably seen their facility. They built a new flat-roofed facility of several acres of size and put solar panels on the top, and they are already in compliance with the aspirations of this initiative. And they set a model for the region and the state, but they also help answer your question as to whether or not it's viable on Long Island.
No doubt that in parts it's viable. I'm just worried about the overall goals and meeting them because, as you know, in our town of Brookhaven, and first let me say, I agree with you. I applaud Claire Rose, a fantastic company that is ahead of its time and very, very environmentally friendly, as obviously they've done this solar panels on the roof. But as you know, there was a proposed solar farm at a sod farm up in Shoreham in Brookhaven.
Sure.
Now, setting the stage for those that don't realize what we're talking about, there was a very large sod farm in Shoreham, and they were proposing to put a very large solar farm there. Residents turned out at Town Hall by the hundreds fighting against the solar panels, and their argument was, now this is not anything that would take down trees, it wouldn't impose any problems for anything. It was on a sod farm. It was covering grass. Yet, they fought against it because they didn't like the view. There was a housing community across the street that would rather see the grass, and they didn't want to see it. And that's commonplace, unfortunately, in Long Island, is the NIMBY aspect. Yes, it's a wonderful idea. We love it as long as somebody else does it.
Mr. Morelli, why do you rise?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My apologies, Mr. Murray. I just wanted to ask members of the Ways and Means Committee go to the Speaker's conference room. I think it would move the evening along, and I apologize for the interruption.
Certainly, Mr. Morelli. Ways and Means, Speaker's conference room. Mr. Murray, back to you.
Okay.
May I respond?
No, yes, please.
First, let me just make the observation, sort of as a continuation of your prior question. Long Island is the fastest growing solar market in the whole state. It is not a place where you see a lot of rejection. The Tallgrass, I think was the name of the subdivision in
Right.
Shoreham that you're referring to, that was opposed because it was really improper land use planning, not because there was a rejection of the technology or of the premise
Agreed.
of that technology. That particular site was opposed in part because it was just basic bad planning. By contrast, I just mentioned before the Claire Rose project in the same township,
Right.
basically the same types of citizens in terms of economic and cultural realities, and they embraced it and celebrated it. We have, even within our own town, more acceptance. There is a new project, for example, at the Brookhaven National Laboratory that even in the Pine Barrens, that even the Pine Barrens Society has supported. We have numerous projects in my own district, an elementary school in the Comsawag School District, and I could go on. The point being that there is no movement against solar. There is no great threat to solar continuing to accelerate in its popularity. If we take a lesson from the Tallgrass project, it is that you can't use solar with impunity if it's going to compromise the viewshed or the sense of place of a community. And that's what those citizens came out to say. They said, we love the rural farmland that is about to be taken over and made into an industrial aspect visually. It compromises our sense of place and our sense of community. They weren't saying we don't like solar.
Right. And I agree with you 100%. The feedback that I've gotten from my community and my district is the same. Like I said before, it's not an argument against solar. I support it as well. I think it's a great idea. I'd love to see the movement continue that way. When I look at the benchmarks that have to be met here, I question whether or not we can. And I bring this up because we have several government buildings. We have Brookhaven Town Hall that has the turbines. We have Suffolk County government that has many solar panels in parking lots. We're doing what we can, and private companies like Claire Rose are doing what they can, but that's not meeting these yet, and we would need quite a bit more to meet that, and I just question whether or not we'd actually be able to get there, and whether it would...
I think your question is a prudent one, and I think it's an intelligent and thoughtful question that you pose. I happen to believe that if we don't try, then we're certainly not going to get there. It sort of reminds me of the old question that if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Right.
We should do more than just ask in this case. What's at stake is, particularly for those of us in the coastal zone, in your own district, for example, you've been invaded with ticks from Texas, the Lone Star tick. You've been invaded with pine beetles. See any dead trees in your neighborhood lately? You have a new hole in the barrier island that was punched by a tropical hurricane. You've been subjected to floods, droughts. All of these and more have affected not only our neighborhood in coastal New York, but with the rise of sea level, the acidification of the oceans, the loss of shellfish and finfish fisheries, we are seeing potential problems that we now have been able to clearly see accelerating out of our control and completely destabilizing our economies. And so for that reason, I believe it is appropriate to aspire to set goals that, if reached, will not change the global climate, but may change the global acceptance. And I think that is an important part of this initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Engelbright. On the bill?
Thank you.
On the bill?
And again, I applaud you for your efforts, and I agree that we should be aiming towards there. My concern is whether or not we will be able to reach these benchmarks. with, again, as I said, the NIMBYism that does occur quite often on Long Island. So I do have a suggestion moving forward that might be very helpful in helping to reach this goal. So the governor and the LIPA Reform Act, when that passed, things were turned over to PSEG. Well, PSEG then says, we don't need any local power generation on Long Island. We're doing just fine. So they shut down a project, the Caithness 2 project, an extremely gas-run project, but a very clean project. Now, PSEG just recently built the exact same plant in Connecticut, put out press releases telling everyone how environmentally friendly it was, how it was cleaning up the environment and doing wonders, and yet they're leading the fight to stop Caithness 2 from moving forward. To me, that makes no sense. We can immediately start cleaning up the environment by shutting down some of the old, dirty, filthy power plants that are still running and get Caithness 2 up and running. So the governor can help move us along quite quickly on Long Island by simply saying, let's move forward, get Caithness 2 up and running, and immediately we will start cleaning up the environment. I think that's a great start, and then maybe at that point we can reevaluate and see if these benchmark goals are actually attainable. But I think that's the smarter solution. So while I do support the premise of the bill, and I think it's a great idea to continue to push forward, I'd like to see those steps taken first in the immediate and then revisit this. So for now, I will be voting against the bill, but I do support the premise of the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Graff.
Will the sponsor yield?
I'm pleased to yield.
Steve, do you know how much the solar panels and stuff, they're charging LIPA or PSE&G per kilowatt?
We're unclear as to what your question is.
Right. So a couple of years ago, I went to the ISO, and what was happening was we were paying 10 cents per kilowatt from NIPA for power that was generated. But what I was getting was, for solar power, we were forcing PSE&G or LIPA to purchase solar power. All right, when they put and they were paying like 28 to 30 cents per kilowatt. So it's almost 3 times more because the technology isn't cheaper. Would you agree with that?
The upfront costs of solar are more than the upfront costs of simply bringing power in off the street for your new house.
Well,
if you
what
use
would happen
conventional electricity, yeah.
If you look at the courthouse in Central Islip, and they have all the solar panels there, that they leased the parking lot from the county, and PSE&G or LIPA, they're forced to buy the energy that's created by those solar panels. Correct?
Depends upon the particular installation, but frequently that is accurate, yes.
Right. If you're generating more power than you're using, then LIPA, we've forced LIPA
Right,
or
that's
PSE&G.
the net metering
Right.
concept, and that's correct, yes.
And the other problem is when you foil the records for LIPA to find out how much they're paying for, I don't know if you ever did this, find out how much they're paying per kilowatt or how much they're paying for the power when it comes to solar or anything else, what you'll get is redacted, and they tell you that the price that we're paying is a trade secret. Is there anything in this bill that would make them disclose how much we're paying per kilowatt?
The bill is not that fine-grained to the specific point that you are speaking. It does require reporting by the DEC to the legislature, by other agencies, NYSERDA and others to the legislature to keep us apprised. And if there are abuses or variations that don't make sense, it gives us an opportunity to do our due diligence. I should also point out that we seem to be talking about solar here, which is appropriate because solar is a very significant part of our future. It has to be. We have to wean ourselves from fossil fuels, and the sun is in the southern sky every day.
Well, I could agree, but we're not watching how much money I tell people all the time, we call this green energy. And there's a reason that we call it green energy. It costs a lot of money. And sometimes it costs 3 times more than what we're paying for the others.
Well, let's be clear here. That's humorous. It's not entirely accurate. In fact, there are significant upfront costs, but amortized over the useful life of the equipment that once it's installed, you make money.
Yeah, but Steve, we're not doing that. What we actually have is on Long Island, we have companies that are popping up. And basically what they're doing is installing solar panels. And the sole purpose for installing those solar panels are to generate and sell that electricity, right, to PSE&G and LIPA. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and in fact,
and
I
now
celebrate the fact that there are companies popping up, that there are new jobs being created, and that people are, despite the costs of upfront investment, are making that investment and thereby investing themselves into a long-term commitment to stay in our state, to reap the benefits of their investment over time, and in the larger sense, to help us collectively avoid having to build new power plants.
Well, the other thing
Great savings to the ratepayers.
Well, I don't know about that, because what's happening now is also a lot of homeowners, the solar companies are coming to them and saying, listen, we will charge you, presently you're paying 19 cents per kilowatt, okay? If you allow us to put the solar panels on your house, right, you'll come down to 16%. This is one of their deals, 16 cents per kilowatt, and you'll have an increase of 2 cents each year.
Let me just ask you a question, may I?
Let me just finish if you can. And they'll do this for 15 years. And most of the energy that they're talking about, what they're doing is they're selling it back to LIPA or selling it back at a high rate. So, I mean, it's not really a savings to us. And the other thing you have to look at, do you know how much Suffolk County pays per month for electricity?
No, I don't really remember. I was a county legislator for 10 years, but I'm sure it's changed.
You have my condolences.
Thank you.
You know.
Thank you.
My understanding is Suffolk County pays about $2 million a month for electricity. Right? Brookhaven pays over $500,000 a month for electricity.
I'm surprised if it's only $2 million a month, because at the University at Stony Brook, it's more than that.
Okay. The town of Islip, I think the last time I heard it was about $400,000 a month. And Sachem School District is about $250,000 or more a month. That's every month. Now, this all goes right to our taxes. All right? And what's happening now is if we keep pushing towards energy that's going to cost us 3 times more, those prices are going to go up. Wouldn't you agree?
Al, it will reduce costs. I think you have to do more than just look at the page that only deals with solar, for example, on an initial cost comparison basis. Please stand back and gather in the big picture. You don't have to build new power plants to meet peak demand. Most of our, 40% of our demand on an annualized basis is during the hot summer. What if we have a power distributed system instead of a few power plants that we're dependent upon? We're going to pay either way up front, but over time, the solar option will give us more flexibility, lower costs, and, by the way, protect the environment. It will help reduce our carbon footprint. It will help reduce our need to bring natural gas from Texas and Oklahoma.
Well, we have a lot of natural gas here, right? But we're not going after the natural gas. I'm not talking about just this chamber. I know there's a lot of natural gas in this chamber. I'm talking about in New York that we're not tapping. It's
I'm
tapped
glad you
here all the time.
clarified.